I ran an operational assessment on a foreign professional services firm last spring and found 22 hours a week the owner was spending on work that didn't require them. Annualized at their effective hourly rate, that was $312,000 in capacity, going to the wrong work every year. He knew he was busy. How many of those hours required his expertise specifically? That was the part he'd never measured. This is what I call operational bleed. The external cost of cognitive capital being consumed by work the business could route elsewhere. Every service business owner bleeds some. Most have never measured how much. The reason it stays invisible is that every task the owner handles feels necessary in the moment. Of course, they should respond to that client question. Of course, the proposal needs their review before it goes out. Viewed individually, each task looks like the cost of doing business. Viewed in total, across a week, the full weight of it becomes calculable, and the number that comes back is almost always bigger than the owner expected. The operational bleed assessment maps every hour the owner spends in a given week against a single question. Does this task require their expertise, or does it require their presence? Those are different things. Expertise is what the client is paying for. The judgment and the work only the specific person can produce at the level the business was built on. Presence is just showing up and handling something because no one else has been set up to handle it. When you run that question against everything the owner does in a given week, the picture that comes back is almost always a surprise. Most owners estimate they're spending 60 to 70% of their time on expertise-required work. The actual number, once every task is mapped and categorized, is usually closer to 40%. The rest is presence. The owner is touching it because they're the available person and because the system routes it to them by default. The gap between estimated and actual tends to run 20 to 30 percentage points. It exists because individual tasks feel small. A 2-minute Slack reply here, a 5-minute approval there. The accumulation across a full week is invisible until it's logged. The human brain is poor at tracking distributed time costs. It remembers the big blocks and underestimates everything that happened in between. The audit itself is a conversation and a log, run simultaneously. The owner walks through the previous week task by task, and for each item they answer 2 questions. How much time did this take, and would the business break if someone other than me had handled it? Most of the time, the answer to the second question is no. The task just hasn't been transitioned out yet. The owner is handling it because they always have, because the business grew around their availability before anyone thought to redesign the operating layer underneath it. Logging it makes the pattern visible in a way that no amount of general awareness can replicate. You have to see it written down with hours attached. The dollar value calculation is simple. Take the owner's effective hourly rate and multiply it by the hours per week going to presence required work, then multiply by 48 working weeks. The number that comes back is what the business is paying for the owner's availability in work that could be handled by a better system. For the owner I mentioned at the start, 22 hours a week, 4 on board firm, the number came back at $312,000. That's the cost of 22 hours per week of presence required work at expertise required rates, annually. Some of that work still needs to happen. It just needs to happen without the owner being the person who handles it. The question the assessment answers is how much of it could be removed from the owner's queue and what it would be worth if it were. Most owners, when they see the number, spend a few minutes just sitting with it. For that firm, $312,000 measured the gap between how the business was running and how it could run if the operating layer caught up to the size of the operation. The owner had been handling the same types of tasks he'd always handled at the same level of personal involvement, and the business had scaled around that pattern without anyone redesigning it. The number looks different at different revenue levels. At $1.2 mm, operational bleed typically runs 15-20 hours per week. At 3 to 5 mm, it's usually 20-28 hours, but the structural pattern holds across all of them. Once the bleed is mapped and the dollar value is calculated, the assessment produces a priority list. Which categories of presence required work can be removed from the owner's queue immediately, and which require building new infrastructure to handle at scale. The priority list is ordered by 2 things, the dollar value of the bleed per category and the complexity of removing it. The highest value, lowest complexity items go first. That's where the infrastructure build starts. For that 4-man firm, the priority list produced a 60% reduction in the owner's administrative load within 90 days. The work removed from his queue fell into 2 buckets, tasks that a trained team member could handle against a documented process, and tasks that AI systems built to his standard could catch automatically. The 22 hours per week became 9. The freed capacity went somewhere specific. When you remove 13 hours of presence required work from an owner's week, those hours go to the expertise required work the business actually needs from them. The consultations get better because the owner walks in with something left. The client relationships get the attention they were never getting because the calendar was always too full. For that firm, 3 accounts that had been quietly flagged as churn risks moved to fully engaged within 60 days of the capacity shift. 2 expanded their engagements. The reason the assessment comes before any building is that without the map, everything looks equally important. Owners who skip the diagnostic and go straight to implementing AI tools end up building based on what feels urgent, and urgency is rarely what's costing the most in owner capacity. The map reveals where the actual impact is, the specific tasks consuming the most capacity per week, ranked by dollar value and removability. The businesses running this diagnostic now are building infrastructure in the right order. Every quarter that passes without the map means another quarter of the owner's capacity flowing to presence required work at expertise required rates. The gap between businesses that have done this work and businesses that haven't is compounding in the quality of the output and the consistency of the client experience. By the time it's obvious in a revenue report, the compounding has been running for a year. The owners who run the assessment and act on it work just as many hours afterward. The hours go to different work. To the clients who deserve the full version of their expertise, to the thinking only the owner can do at the level the business needs. That's what the number is actually measuring. How much of the owner's best capacity is going to the work that deserves it. If you want more on what this assessment looks like inside a service business and what the infrastructure build looks like when it starts in the right place, subscribe. This is what the channel covers, and there's more coming. And if you want to run the assessment on your business specifically, to see your number, understand where the bleed is, and get a priority list for where to start, the operational snapshot is how we do that. Free. 30 minutes. Link below.